Hey everyone, this is the March 30th, 2022 Sig-Auth meeting. Yesterday was code freeze for V124, so I think everybody's good and tired right now. Thankfully, we have a pretty light agenda. Granted, I don't know to hear how much discussion you wanted to have about trusted anchor sets today, but we'll find out when we get to it. But Max, I think you have the first two items.
Yeah, I think we can drop the second one because you already answered this. So about the first one, the idea is simple. I proposed it on Slack. So we have a bunch of APIs to debug authentication flow, for example, token review, subject access review, self-subject access review, and so on. But there is no API which helps you to get know who you are, your attributes, your user ID, username, extra attributes, and so on. And as we discussed on Slack, it looks like a missing part of this. So I propose to add some kind of an API endpoint to check your attributes and also provide a corresponding kubectl command to make debug easier, to make debugging easier. Yes, that's the idea.
I remember this being rejected in the past due to concerns about anyone with a token being able to play it and see who it belonged to. I want to say the concerns were from Mike Denise, one of the Googlers. Do you also remember that, Mo?
I do not. This might have been before me.
Okay.
I think you can still use token review to get user attributes.
But most users cannot, which is why you're asking for this. If most users could, you wouldn't be asking for this.
Can't you just use
Reasonable.
Can't you just make a request that gets rejected by RBAC and it returns your username?
Yeah.
Not saying that as a solution to this feature request, but that seems
I
so
don't remember it. So I don't remember whether that was there or not. I bring this up because I would like to be sure that same party gets asked again, so they get a chance to explain it.
Yeah. So, with my personal experience with this in GCP is that GCP does, or GKE really does, encode some encrypted blobs in the extra field, which I guess they're happy with all the other webhooks and everything else being able to see, presumably because they're semi-privileged. Yeah, I mean, I would personally like to see this. I guess I'd maybe even be okay if it's the RBAC is optional or something, but the RBAC to call the API is optional. I guess that would at least alleviate the concerns. I know Jordan, who's also not on the call, had mentioned concerns about just the extra fields in general. We don't know what people are putting in them, and that could be bad. Granted, I feel like we shouldn't rely on hiding secrets inside of extra. People can do anything they want.
Yeah, I mean, the problem maybe, so we could build something that works for RBAC, but when you're running on a cloud platform, usually you're integrated with the cloud platform's IAM abstraction. So kind of who you are and what you can do is kind of a very open-ended question when you're using webhook token authenticators and webhook token authorizers.
Or proxy or something.
Yeah. I'm not saying this wouldn't work at all those. I should have used the word authorization. The idea being that if you built an API but did not provide Bootstrap RBAC policy for it, then it's up to the cluster admin to assign that. So that's what I was saying, is that we could if the concern is who can see this and you want to control who can see it, then go for it. Don't give anyone access, or give whoever you trust to have access. Right, like in Tanzu and OpenShift clusters, users can see who they are and their groups, but not extra. Yes, maybe. David, am I remembering right? I don't think you can see your own extra in.
I don't think you can see your own extra. I couldn't say for sure, but
Yeah, I remember you can see UID, username, and groups, but you can't see the last bit.
yeah. And it exists in OpenShift because OpenShift also has a user concept, which is managed on the platform, and that isn't the case for General Cube.
So as I see it, most of the time, that's enough just to see groups and username. That would be enough.
Would this new endpoint be authorized or available to all? Micah's question. Yeah, I mean, so I think that's open-ended. We could do something similar to what we did with the bound service token account discovery endpoint, where we only bind that one to service accounts. And something like this, we may, I guess I don't know if I care if the service account can see its own metadata, because it's already in the token. So maybe we could also just bind this to service accounts. But the choice for binding it to like system : authenticated or system : unauthenticated is deferred to the platform for the discovery doc. And we could technically do the same here. The same concern is present. It does reduce the usefulness of the API, because then it will maybe work or maybe not work, depending on which platform you're on. But if we want, Max, we can try to follow up with Mike and Jordan, make sure. I guess, David, you're here. Do you have concerns? What's your stance?
I don't have an issue with it. I just want to make sure that people who had previously objected to it get a chance to object to it again and provide those reasons. And I printed them as best I remember, but it was many years ago that this came up.
So, okay, I'll ping them, and I think we'll discuss the rest on Slack. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Feel free to ping them directly in Slack and try to get feedback. On my side, I'd be happy to look at a KEP, but maybe don't write one until you understand their concerns. And
yep.
If you want, we can also put this on the agenda for 2 weeks from now and try to discuss again if they're on the call that way.
So I will do it on my own if it would be necessary.
I'm more than happy to discuss the second item too, Max. So you don't have to just take what I said as the final answer. Did you want to discuss it?
Yeah, maybe someone had the same problem as I have, just because, we have this webhook authorization that, you can customize your access rights. So we use this to provide some kind of a multi-tenancy to forbid access to some namespaces or some resources during days or nights for some engineers. So such policies, and we want to enforce them. So we want them to be strict. But if webhook doesn't work because of something, so it counts like okay situation. So you do not policies doesn't work if webhook doesn't work. That's not. I don't think this is. So in our case, this is not useful. It became we cannot use this. this webhook authorization.
So just so I'm understanding, you're using a webhook authorization as a deny authorizer, and when
Yeah.
there is an error, what happens is it gets treated as no opinion as opposed to deny.
But it allows, so if it allowed by RBAC, for example, and we use webhook just to deny requests. So and if these requests are allowed by RBAC, so they are allowed if webhook isn't unavailable. Something like
So
that.
it's not about whether the webhook is available or not. It's the fact that you need the webhook to happen before the RBAC authorizer.
And forbid every request. Yeah, something like this.
Okay. This is similar to what Daniel asked about a while back. That sounds interesting enough to be kept worthy to me. What did you say, Mo?
Oh yeah, no. What I said is, this is totally fine. There's already folks trying to write a KEP for a proper structured config for multiple authorization webhooks. One of which would be this capability of configuring your failure policy, and it could be fail closed by default, or it could be there is no default and you have to tell us. But what I didn't want is more API server flags just trying to tack on features.
As it happens right now, I believe we have an ordered authorizer. But yeah, I don't object to a structured config if that's necessary to do it. That sounds okay. The idea of being able to build something that allows a deny authorizer sounds very reasonable to me. It's a thing that we've made use of before.
Yeah, I think the feature is great, and I feel like it should be very easy and accessible, whereas I think today it's a little bit weird. And the deny authorizers were added after the fact, so I think the fail close behavior, the behavior of failing open is backwards compatible, but not great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do agree this whole thing would need a KEP, and if we're going to write a KEP, well, there's already an existing effort for a KEP. Please just work on a KEP together. Anything else, Max?
No, everything's okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to wait for the implementation of the structure config, I think.
Anyone else have anything for me to next week? Third. So I wanted to bring up, should have linked the PR. So there was some recent effort by some folks to clean up or try to fix some bugs in our client side OIDC logic. So this is the not the server side, but with kubectl and client billing bulk. And I wanted to get folks' feelings around sort of the health of this thing that we have, that we basically don't fix bugs in, even though there's like known issues. There've been known issues open for years for this thing that do cause people pain, and we basically haven't meaningfully changed it. And multiple, if you ignore my one fix, like 5 years, 4 years. So that's one bit I wanted to talk about. But then the other thing was, do folks have thoughts on just refactoring the whole thing to do something drastically different, just to not try to use the kube config as its storage layer, and instead actually use the file system as like one lock instead of this weird. So today it has a tier of locks where there's like the in-process lock and the kube config based lock-ish. And it's really messy and really hard to reason about what's going to happen. And well, there's bugs in it. And folks were trying to fix the bugs, and like Tim and myself reviewed it, and we were like, oh, so bad. And then like it didn't make code freeze because I just didn't feel confident enough in what the change was doing to like feel good about it. Tim or anyone? Did anyone have thoughts on this?
I don't have experience in that area of the code.
David, you wrote it.
Son of a gun. So I don't remember that area of code.
Yeah, it's
That's
like,
more accurate.
yeah, I think literally you wrote it, Eric did some changes to it, or you and Eric maybe wrote it together or whatever, and then it was just, it hasn't been touched in meaningfully touched in at least 4 years.
Can you sorry, for those of us who don't remember, can you enumerate some of the bugs in it?
So there, I think there's like 2 open right now, but they all come from weird behaviors caused by this global client cache, primarily around when refresh tokens are rotated, and basically it gets confused and will like sometimes return the stale refresh token or sometimes not. And so, you know, on certain providers, this is not problematic because a lot of providers will just keep returning the same refresh token or no refresh token at all and just assume you're using the old one. Whereas like modern providers, modern in the sense of more security conscious ones, make the refresh tokens one use. So you get a new one every single time and the old one's invalidated. In those cases, this thing goes haywire and just falls off a cliff.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I have a hard time reasoning about this code because you know, there's locks inside this client cache. There's like global locks. Then there's this thing that hides a lock because it's the kubeconfig abstraction. And then all of this is really, really muddled if you ever invoke more than one kubectl command at the same time, because there's no synchronization against the kubeconfig itself. So then like you're gonna basically trash your kubeconfig, which is also not cool.
There's no flock on updates to the kube config.
No. Unless something dramatically changed. No.
That's terrifying.
Yes, I know. Like, but like, yeah. Go ahead, Tria.
I was just gonna say, like for the out of tree provider plugins, that is like for the G-Cloud one, that's what we have done is we have a separate cache file where we use a simple locking. Actually, we don't even lock it. We just rewrite the whole file every time, like atomically. If you have a complicated one thing we looked at was using something like BoltDB, so just like a tiny key value store, so that we didn't have to worry about like all the complexity of locking the file and ensuring that writes are consistent and all that good stuff. In our case, we're only caching a single value, so we just went with atomically replacing the file.
Yeah,
I think
which I
this
think.
is-
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Max.
I wanted to say that I think this is a good pattern, and we ended up using our custom like exec plugin doing something the same thing, like storing credentials in a separate file, and it works perfectly.
Atomic
Yeah,
update
that's
to the
what-
file don't get around the read, update, write cycle problem though. Like you could still have 2 processes that read the file and then race to which one writes.
I think in our case, it doesn't matter because when you use G-Cloud authentication, like no matter which cluster you're connecting to, you're always the same person. It's a little weird.
Yeah, no, that there are specific circumstances where it doesn't matter, but for the kube config file, specifically for configuration files, like there are certainly circumstances where just doing atomic replaces is not enough.
Okay, yeah, because if you're doing refresh tokens, you got to read the refresh token, send it, and then write a new one. I think, yeah, BoltDB I think has transactions, which would
Yeah, I mean,
significantly help you.
yeah. So I mean, I guess that's where this comes down to, right? Is how far are we willing to go to actually make this work right? Like correct. I shouldn't use the word right because it's weird. this happens to be important to people because it's built into kubectl, and very soon this will be the only thing built into kubectl, because the next release is when the built-in AKS and GK stuff goes away. So I'm just trying to sort of figure out how we roll out changes to this thing and how dramatic we can be with them. As a for example, if we build in some mechanism that doesn't store credentials in the kubeconfig anymore, well, now you can't copy paste your kubeconfig across computers. Which, as much as I don't want people to do, they do that.
But if like if refresh token rotation enabled for your OpenID Connect provider, you cannot copy configs around your servers.
Yeah, you're right, because as soon as you use it in one place, it'll invalidate the other one, which is what you want, but it is frustrating.
So this is a real problem for DEX, because in DEX, rotation of refresh tokens was enabled by default, and we have a lot of bug reports about this, that kubectl lost refresh tokens.
Yeah, it's easy for it to do that because it's just not sound. I mean, at a high level, what I was proposing is that we piggyback off the cache directory that is currently used for discovery and some other things, which I don't remember what they are, and start having a distinct separate cache in there and using that file or whatever as the actual locking mechanism, not anything in process or anything like that, and not having multiple layers. Like, if you make 1 million clients, it's okay. You get 1 million copies, but they'll still be synchronized by the file system. It doesn't matter. But I don't. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has strong opinions on this, or if there's anyone willing to like work on this stuff. But yeah, I just don't think trying to keep it as is going to work out. I think we're just trying to monkey patch around structural issues. Anyone else have anything on this? We can go to here still.
Can we use fuzz testing now in Kubernetes or not? The 118 stuff, Kubernetes Go 118.
We have not checked. I suspect we haven't bumped to 118 yet because it hasn't been out that long. It usually takes a while before. I guess we're large enough that we do enough terrible things that version bumps of Go cause us pain. I don't know. Why did you bring up the fuzzing?
I mean, this seems like a situation that cries out for fuzzing.
Or try to just bash at it and watch it implode and stuff.
I'm still confused about each client in this current implementation having their own mutex for protecting kubeconfig rates, because they're all using the same kubeconfig, right? So you have multiple clients with separate mutexes to protect rates to the same kubeconfig. That just sounds broken.
No, it is broken at many layers, Tim. It's just like it's written subtly enough that if you just scan it, you won't pick up on the fact that it's doing things that don't structurally make sense. It's easy to miss because there's not a lot of code, but it's all very subtle and it's very deep within client Go. And its interactions with its surroundings are not obvious.
And apparently it's my fault.
You or Eric's or both.
I don't remember enough to have a meaningful opinion, Mo. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I was hoping to try to get a little bit of discussion on this because I felt bad that we couldn't come up with something within Code Free's time, but I was like, I wasn't comfortable with the changes as proposed. Okay. Kier?
It doesn't sound like anyone has a strong objection to beautifying it.
Yeah, it's basically, this is abandoned. Go do whatever you want. just don't break it worse. All right, trusted anchor sets. I have not read this kept.
That would be because I just wrote it at 3 a.m. last night. So this is so yeah, this is some of the feedback we got on the original certificate provisioner kept draft Google Doc thingy was that trust anchor sets were a useful piece of functionality on their own, so they should be broken out into a KEP and landed. And then, so I've done that. It's largely the same, except I did a little digging into how certificate signing requests interact with RBAC, and I copied that mechanism for trust anchor sets. So the trust anchor sets now carry a spec.signer name field that is the name of their signer that controls them. And then you can use RBAC to say, hey, user XYZ can update all trust anchor sets associated with signer X. The rest is pretty much a straightforward extraction. So if anyone feels like giving it a look, please do. And we can have an in-depth discussion next time or something.
So I just did a quick scan of the API. The one thing that sticks out to me is, as a for example, on these PEM things, it is the concept of a CRL discussed within this KEP?
No.
Okay. Can we have a concept of a CRL?
I don't know very much about how CRLs work.
So there's a
work a few different ways, but the most obvious one for this is just a CRL blacklist file.
deny list.
Okay.
Yeah. Deny list. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, so it is possible for the CRL endpoint to be embedded within the CA itself. And that's not uncommon for like the big CAs to have it because, you know, they have a ton of PKI infrastructure, but it would be nice to have the capability of, I have this the CA bundle, whatever, it's maybe just a file on disk, and I want to be able to control revocation for it within this.
Okay.
And, like, the perspective I'm coming from this side is customers keep asking us to use their corporate root CAs for Kubernetes and don't care when we tell them not to. And it is really hard and impractical to do that without a CRL support.
Do you think it would be better to have a mechanism that is just within this trust anchor set object, have a list of revoked certificates or revoked certificate hashes? Or I know there's also like OCSP, right, where you can designate a URL that will serve the.
Yeah, I guess I was imagining the URL based one, but I guess you could have both. I guess it wouldn't necessarily hurt to have both. I think the URL one is traditionally what people kind of expect because that's what other tools tend to consume.
Okay.
So
Don't client libraries, wouldn't they expect that information to be embedded in the certificate and not, I mean, I'm only moderately familiar with Go's TLS stack.
Yeah, so
I would imagine you can't just mix and match like, oh, hey, here's my, I don't know. I'll have to look. How does Go take the OCSP URL?
So the last I checked, which has been a while, and maybe David, you have more experience with this, is It's not in the standard library, but like Cloudflare provides some hooks that you can add to your Go code.
There's some parsing methods in the standard library, but the standard verifier doesn't have a spot to drop it. So there's not like a verify option, at least as of one level of Go. Is that 116? Is the last time I remember personally looking.
So there would be, I guess, some implication for like the kubelet or whoever, whichever actor is doing the verification to be enhanced to also consume the information in some way, shape, or form.
In this case, it's the every workload would have to be, like kubelet is only responsible for dropping these files on disk.
Right. Which is fair. I think what I'm hoping for is the mechanism to be available, and less of the enforcement that workloads do the right thing. You can't enforce that they do anything right anyway.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely we could have a OCSP URL or something like that. Put that as a
David or like Tim or anyone, have you all seen requests for anything like CRLs and stuff, or am I just in my own world?
I've gotten a lot of requests for it. The assumption is that it's built into the library and we just aren't using it. I don't know that I have an opinion about coupling it together here. My memory is that you can actually just say on a CA bundle, here's where my CRL is. And if the client honors it, it works. And so if the trust anchor gives us a spot to place that, which I haven't read this KEP, probably because it was made at 3 a.m. today, then it may just work. But I was going to withhold judgment till I read.
Okay. Yeah, I guess in my head, I was imagining like if you have an existing Kubernetes cluster with just its file-based CA bundle and you have some way of doing revocation in the sense of knowing when to revoke some certificates that you have issued. Maybe it would be helpful if it wasn't part of the CA bundle. Okay. Does anybody else have anything on this? I realize probably no one has read it too much, but if folks have thoughts, we can certainly talk about it.
Just one thought from looking at the API here. I definitely think this will be useful for organizations that maintain their own private CAs for internal services. I'm not sure I don't think signer name is necessarily relevant in that case. Something to think about.
So the use case I was thinking of is I have, some private CA and I want to use it for like mutual TLS between workloads in my cluster. So I create my own example.com/supercoolCA signer, and that's how I surface the ability to use that private CA hierarchy inside my cluster. There's some cases where the signer name is kind of redundant, where like what Mike was wanting, where we could throw some certs into one of these trust anchor sets and then use it in a webhook backend config. But I figured you could just make up a dummy signer name in that case.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you can always just make up a dummy signer name. I guess I'm just encouraging you to think about the case where you want to do like mutual TLS or something between a service that's outside of the cluster as well.
Okay.
So, Tim, are you saying that maybe signer name would be like optional if you don't have to use it?
Yeah, that might be all I'm saying, which is pretty nitpicky at this stage. But I guess just kind of thinking about that use case more generally, not having looked at the KEP.
In the model where I'm thinking about this, so and my perspective is colored very much by working on a particular implementation, so I may be wrong. The if you're using mutual to us and you want to federate yourself with some other company, you want to talk to their workloads, that's still occurring under the auspices of your example.com/supercoolca signer, but it will have a different named trust anchor set. You'll have the default one for your workloads, and then you'll have, Billy Bob's Emporium trust anchor set. And you have to surface both of those trust anchor sets into your workloads, because you definitely don't want to intermingle them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I'll need to think about it some more.
Anybody else have any thoughts? I guess we can make a quick look at. Granted, I think CI has not been happy recently. So it might be more red than expected. Nish, why is this scary symbol here?
If you click on it, which one is failing? I can take a look at that one.
Okay, no, that's fine. It looks like otherwise the regular stuff is happy. And then let's see. Service connection. Okay, that seems. That's right. The service account token stuff is like the only thing that ever shows up as working. Okay. What is going on? This one. Bunch of tests though. Maybe let's pick one that not a bunch of tests. So okay, not very confident in this being actually related to us. Maybe somewhere in here there's a Sig-Auth. David, do you happen to remember what these tests actually do?
My eyes are so bad I can't read what you're showing me.
Okay, all right, hold on. Sorry, that is my bad.
There we go. Blind person. So the opting out was to be sure that you didn't get it assigned by admission. I am surprised that it's flaking. I don't have insight as to why.
Right. I mean, all of these failures seem to be related when a bunch of other things failed. And I'm just wondering if it just timed out because the whole info was kind of.
It could, depending on like how the pod was trying to get created or something like that.
Yeah. Kind of willing to cheat here and be like, we just went through quick freeze and we don't need to worry about this. No, we can give everyone 15 minutes back. Does anyone disagree? Can we just take it easy?
Well, I wouldn't even say take it easy, but I've got a bunch of other stuff to look at.
All right, we'll take that. Does anyone else have anything they want to talk about? not, we can see all in cubes. All right, I'll put that as a yes. Yeah. So, well, take care.